How are you all going this fine afternoon? I know it's been a big couple of days. And I know we are probably a bit acquainted by now, but maybe there's some people who went around yesterday morning, and if you haven't met me before, I'm Kartini. I often say it's like martini, but with a K. That's been my catchphrase for a while, so you don't forget, basically. But I've always really been a big enthusiast about community and music and creativity. And I sing in choirs. I've always sung in choirs. I sing in the Inner West Voices, which is based over in Sydney. And back in 2008, I was in a little indie pop band called AI. So I don't know if that's a bit spooky, serendipitous, or I don't know, ironic maybe. But 17 years later, and here I am working in generative AI music. So there's a little bit more on that soon. I'll just give you a bit of background really about where I've come from in the last 4 years or so. I have a studio called Kopi Studio, and I'm the director of the studio, and I'm the founder of the studio. Prior to that, I was a creative producer at Google's Creative Lab, which was very foundational in the future of my kind of explorations around creative AI. Kopi actually is sort of like a play on the word called Kopi Susu, which means coffee with milk in Indonesian. It's a very endearing term to people like me who are halfies, basically, that I get called whenever I'm over there. But Kopi it's really, we're a creative digital studio, but also an artist network, and we have sort of service-based work, which we do with some like pretty cool clients, like Creative Australia. There's an independent music library called Melody. We did the full like UI, UX branding for, and worked with the developers for that. One of our very first web clients was Hermannsburg Potters out in Alice. And sort of like weaved in that whenever we had the opportunity to, basically we would try and do collaborations with creative entities and artists. And for example, one of the first projects we did was an AR app with an architecture firm called Other Architects that were exploring natural burial practices and how we could visualize that for the Biennale of Architecture in Versailles. So I've sort of done a little bit of everything actually over the years. So it's been really fascinating where I've had multiple touch points and being a part of this program the last few days and seeing where some of this technology has gotten to, and it's been really nice refresher to see these bits and pieces. So before I started at Kopi, I was actually at Google's Creative Lab, and when I was there, we had the opportunity to do something and prototype a whole bunch of projects which were called machine learning tools for artists and creatives, and that ranged from musicians, which is where I've sort of landed now, but at one point it was even with puppeteers, with a Tasmanian-based theatre company called Terrapin, exploring some of those kind of almost like mocap-like technologies. We also did a collaboration with an artist called Caroline Rothwell called ML Botanicals, which was a collaboration with the artist, the Royal Botanical Gardens, and for example, the app, you would take 2 pictures of different types of flowers out in the wild, and then it would sort of generate a new type of flower and would display at the MCA in Sydney. So there was some really cool big breadth, and it was an amazing opportunity for me to kind of get my hands on all this like cool tech and learn all these kind of techniques and things that I've been passing on as well. Like some of the exercises I did yesterday was one of the first exercises I did actually in my interview at Google, so I borrowed that from them. And one of the projects I was the creative producer on the first one was called Precursors to a Digital Muse, which was pre-ChatGPT, really. And it was all about how we can create writing tools to help unlock creativity in new ways. And so sometimes my old team and I like to kind of give ourselves a pat on the back and think that we actually invented ChatGPT in our own way. But this is and I'll have all these links and I can share them with you, but this article is something I co-wrote with a creative technologist called Rupert Parry, and which was a reflection on our learnings at the time. And it's been 5 years since we've done this, but it's actually, for all the like rapid changes in AI technology in the last 5 years and the massive boom. I was reading this Medium post the other day, and it's still very relevant. A lot of the techniques that we were exploring and how we got into it is still very relevant today. So if you're interested in looking at how you might fine-tune a text model, for example, check out that article. So what was really interesting, actually, before the kind of ChatGPT days, when it was ChatGPT, or it was just called GPT-2, or the early DALL-E days, if you know the image generation side of things, we weren't really saying much at the time, maybe just because we were like massive nerds, but we weren't really talking about it as AI. We were talking about it more specifically as machine learning, and understanding that machine learning is a subset of the study of artificial intelligence. So I was really curious, it is just like this term that's sort of thrown around a lot now, but in case we need a bit of a refresher, I just want to break it down a little bit for you guys, because then it'll give you hopefully a little bit more understanding of how it applies to music. So we know AI, it's actually very broad. It's a whole field of study in science. It's coined by this guy called John McCarthy in 1955. And it was, that idea of the science and engineering of making intelligent machines. But machine learning, which is what we're actually all getting very excited about these days, that is what essentially ChatGPT is all based on, is that kind of exact subset of AI, which was more focused on data and algorithms, trying to emanate how humans learn over time. Is everyone with me still? Good. I'm glad. How many of you already use like some kind of AI, like anything like text-based, mostly text? Does anyone use any music tools? Yes. Awesome. Any image tools? Cool. Just good to suss it out. So just make sure I'm not teaching anyone things they don't already know. So, other subsets of AI really is like robotics and speech and face recognition and automation recommendation systems that we have in, like Netflix or Spotify. And since then, we've really seen this like rapid rise of this idea of like AI slop especially in image generation, for example, and this idea of like content farming. So the ability to customize this idea of generative outputs, I think, is really important right now, because building this kind of capacity and control over how these tools are built will also unlock this sense of kind of trust and agency over time. So who's sick of hearing the word powered by AI? Because yeah, cool, me too. Because it's sort of, in my mind, it's so like wild to me, because it's sort of like saying something's powered by the internet, or it's powered by electricity in my mind as a selling point. And that's sort of, it's interesting, the really big companies who actually understand that if you say it's AI, it's maybe not a good thing. So it really does overlook the fact that a lot of these tools are actually not powered by AI, it's powered by data, and it's powered by people's data, and a lot of it. So why we keep talking about data in this space is, as we know, it's a collection of values that convey information. It can be anything that reduces to this idea of a digital format. It could be text, it could be visuals, it could be sound. I think because I grew up in the 90s, my very first thought of what I thought data actually was, for some reason, has like forever in my brain, has something to do with phone plans and, like how much data I had to buy for $50. But now I feel like I've finally grasped that it's like really how we understand any information you can structure into effectively a spreadsheet. And I always think, like AI eats data for breakfast, like that's what it's all about. But I like this analogy. It's sort of like the more data that you give AI or a machine learning model, it's sort of like a blank canvas, and it helps to shape it more and more. But we are very conscious of the bias in that data, and this is one particular example in like generative image models that I don't want to like name and shame them too much, but it's kind of hilarious because this was for a Women in AI Awards, and we can look at this image and imagine for the Women in AI Awards why this particular image might be a little bit problematic. Mainly because they've probably typed something in like diverse women, diverse, powerful women or something along those lines, but I think it's kind of perpetuating this very like hyper-realistic or unrealistic beauty standard, which basically means that the data that these like image models were trained on were probably a lot of like fantasy-based, images, I imagine. So I just found that really amusing and just something that I like to sort of question whenever I see things like this out in the world, and it's kind of surprising that lots of people aren't really interrogating this more. But there are people and there are different initiatives at the moment. There is a guy called Ed Newton-Rex who's working on something called Fairly Trained. It's like a certification platform for people to go to, and who will actually sort of like work with you to see how you can make sure that the data you're using in your AI models is being like fairly sourced, or you're compensating people for the data that's actually been going into these machines. And there are people who are already fairly trained certified, which is really cool. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of just like a base in this space. And really what I want to talk about is what is AI in the context of music? And what does data look like in the context of music, so that we can create tools in that space as well. So there's, sound waveforms, MIDI generation, metadata, digitized music. That's all kind of forms of data that we could be utilizing in different types of AI music tools. But taking it right back to 1957, this was like the first example really of like computer generated music. It wasn't like, as we understand it now, where you type in a prompt and you get actual music out. It was actually just the ability to create essentially a score of music, and then that score of music was played by real musicians. Lejarin Hilia, who wrote Iliac Suite, and this in this image in the background is actually like some of the very old, very large computers that was used for that. One person I always come back to as well, who's this absolute legend, is Daphne Oram, and she was a British composer, and she was an electronic musician in the 1960s. And I think this quote is amazing. And if there's a little link here, and I've got so many videos to show you, so I'll share all these links so you can delve into some of this like wacky music that she created as like one of the original pioneers of electronic music. But I love that what she says in this quote is kind of foreshadowing some of the future of music and sounds, and it's awesome that it's a chick as well, to me. And just describing it as a kind of modern magic alludes to this like paradigm shift in the way we think about music and technology. She was really awesome. So I won't go too, there's a lot to go through, so I won't go too deep, and there are many things, but essentially in business, it's really blown up in the last few years. Since 2012, a lot of these kind of music tools have been coming to the forefront a lot more. We have tools for mastering like Lambda, Ubit, and Endel. I work known more for like adaptive style music. I'll give you a bit more definitions about that. But the ones I'll just call out that I think are particularly cool is the guys from Uncanny Valley. They're a Sydney-based music studio actually. And they created something called Mimu, which is a generative music engine. The difference between this and essentially like the text-to music image models is essentially it's like a massive catalogue of music that was actually composed by the producers of the company, and then they've created sort of algorithmic ways to mix and match and remix within their own catalogue to create infinite streams of music. So it's sort of interpolating between all of that. But these guys won the very first AI Music Award. What was it? It was like the Eurovision AI Song Contest. Australia won the first Eurovision AI Song Contest, which is so wild and it was with a song where they had used like koala sounds to create some of the samples, and they fed that into an AI model and outputted some like wacky stuff. So yeah, I'll add that in as well. But more recently, the thing every single maybe more like corporate person who comes to me when they go, oh, you're working in AI music, and I go, yeah. They go, have you heard of Udio and Suno? And I go, yes, I have. They're getting sued at the moment actually because of copyright infringement essentially. So a lot of the the big music companies, mainly like Sony, for example, are suing some of these companies saying, look, we're pretty sure that you've scraped our our music and our data, and you're using and profiting from it without compensating us. So people are starting to catch on. There are a lot of artists as well. There is like an open petition, especially over in the US, where artists are signing and calling for responsible practices in AI, and it's kind of building that movement. It's sort of building a little bit more as well.
Are artists being compensated or business like Sony?
It's a good point. Yeah. Well, artists are definitely not getting compensated. I guess they're trying to act on behalf of, like, if we get compensated, then they should also be getting compensated. But that's part of a much bigger problem in the larger, the whole music industry is a bit broken. So it's a good point. I guess if they get compensated, then it will be a good, platform to be then able other people to make claims as well against that. But on the artist-led side of things, as I was saying, Australia won the Eurovision AI Song Contest. I know some people here are maybe already familiar with the work of Holly Herndon and Matt Dryhurst. One of the particular tools that you can play with today, and it is in the link resources, is Grimes's Elf Tech, if anyone's heard of that. Basically, she created a voice model of her own voice. And interestingly, she said that it's sort of like a very interesting exploration around new business models in music. Actually, anyone who uses my voice model, and if you are to succeed and profit from it, then I get half of your royalties for using my voice model. So I think that's pretty interesting. So we've got a few different things here, and I know there's a lot to get through, and then we'll get playing and it'll build. But we've got a few different categories of how AI and music really works. So we have classification models, that's sort of like the Shazams that we understand. There's transcription, that's being able to take in, audio and turn it into something like a MIDI format. For anyone who isn't super musically savvy, MIDI is kind of like piano roll notation that you can use, and it becomes a bit of like an easy way to explore and interpolate between, and it's often used in digital audio workstations like Ableton or Logic. And then one of the things I know a lot of people get really excited about is stem separation. So that's like the ability to basically put in a whole song and for it to just like deconstruct it by instrument or vocals and like completely break it apart. A lot of people in commercial music really care about this kind of stuff, because if you are ever trying to source music on a platform like for a music project and you want to buy some royalty-free music, you often would like the different variations of that. There's the translation of audio from one sound to another. A big one that everyone is excited about at the moment is 11 Labs. That is a voice model. I actually do have a demo here that I thought I would try and throw up a bit. If I can get it. Let's see. Which 11 Labs. It's simply just, text to audio.
Are you enjoying the talk so far, boorda, yeyi crew?
There we go. And get my mouse back over here. Very good. Timbre transfer, that's sort of like the ability to turn one sound source into another. So that's kind of one of the earliest things that I got to experiment with when I was at Google's Creative Lab, and I'll show you a quick little video about that project in a minute. But it's sort of like being able to train a instrument or a sound source like a piano and turn it into something like a violin. And being able to do that has been one of the things that really has captivated me. And then mastering, I think, one of the most interesting insights I've had recently, because I've been interviewing a lot of different independent artists and people in the music industry. A lot of people will say, oh no, I don't use AI. And then they'll be like, oh wait, I do use this thing called Lambda for my mastering. And they'll be like, oh yeah, I do use AI. So they don't even realize, because it's just like becoming a part of your everyday life. And then this is like the generative or adaptive side of things. And so this is kind of the area that I'm very focused in the same way that we have big image generation models and we have big text generation models, we have large music models, which is mainly centered around the text to music. And so there's a few big players in the space at the moment. We have Meta, like Facebook's got one called MusicGen, and that's actually what Koup Music has been based on. It's an open source music model that they claim has been trained with licensed data. So we're using that at least just for now for the sake of experimentation, but the hope is really that we will only release something commercial with a more fairly trained model. Ideally, Stability AI is one that claims to be fairly trained. And then there's Google's Music LM and OpenAI's Jukebox. So yeah, that's kind of like they're the big players in the space. And then there's MIDI generation, which is sort of like the ability to take that, musical notation. It's an easy way, I think, for in music to be able to train a model on, this is a sequence of patterns and like maybe keep going and filling out the space. And there's a really good example of this actually on Google's Creative Lab. They have sort of a funny little doodle where you can like get Mozart to like keep interpolating between like a Mozart track, and you can play with it for free, and it's easy. Also, actually, a lot of these you can play with for free, at least initially. And then there's this idea of like the multimodal. So it's sort of all these things I'm saying, like people are starting to get to that point now where they're thinking about like how can I combine like all these different things? How can you combine this idea of like image to text, the source separation, and the classification for a full suite solution? And that's sort of what the Suno Audios are starting to get into the space of. So you can go on there, you can type in a full prompt, it will like output some music, and it will like create an image for you as well based on that. So I've got a little video here. This is the Machine Learning Tools for Musicians project that I first did with Google's Creative Lab, where we created a few different prototypes. Those prototypes aren't available, but that's sort of why I've gone ahead and made my own since then. And I'll just give you a little bit of vibe of like how I like to work and a bit about the foundation of that as well.
Suggestion to recreate the sound that took me 40 years. That's a diss. Okay, shots fired. Hey Google, relax with the sass about 40%.
Uncanny Valley has partnered with Google's Creative Lab to investigate how music and songwriting can be aided by technology at this time.
Demo memo, basically you can sing into it and turn that audio file into different instruments.
You can put lyrics into the app and it'll spit back possible avenues for you to travel. It'll put me somewhere to play.
I'm seeing a new generation of Australian artists using new tools with their own experiences and creating a unique voice.
If you can put this into kids' hands that didn't see themselves as artists, that's where you're going to see the change in the game.
Yeah, so we developed 3 prototypes, and because it's Google, I can't share them with you because they never got released. So this is all we have to point to, basically. But we created because it was just following the writing tools experiments, we created sort of a lyric generation tool, which, just keeping in mind that this was 2018, 2019, so it's been a good 5 years or so since then. We created something called Adlibber, which was a lyric generation tool. One of the hilarious learnings from that was that we thought like, we'll just like fine tune this on maybe like some hip hop lyrics or something. And then because it was the old days of GPT-2, what came out was like not good. Like lots of ho-ho-hos basically, which is another reflection of like the bias in these kind of data sets and what happens when you fine tune things on that, or the impact of data on outputs. And then we also created something called Demo Memo, which was using that sort of style transfer ability. So you would record something in with your voice, and then you could transform it into a violin or a guitar or a trumpet, for example. And we actually got the fine-tuned that model on the guitar and the violin and the trumpet of some musicians from within our network at the time. And we went and recorded like an hour of that music and just someone playing, trumpet for an hour, so that, one of my old colleagues, Johnny, we used to call it Johnny's trumpet, so you could like sing in the style of Johnny's trumpet essentially, which was pretty cool. So that's what I've been trying to get back to in a way. Where are we going? Not that again. There we go. And so this has led me to Sonic Mutations. After I left Google, I was approached by Stu Buchanan at the Sydney Opera House, who was currently working on a few different projects and was like looking to support artists and people experimenting in this space and just generally with AI. And we created Sonic Mutations. And some of the initial ideas of this was really captured as this process of what we used to call sparks, and we create like a little format of that where you can sort of just feel like those exercises that we were doing yesterday, where you just sort of say like what it is, what you think it does, like put in a scrappy image of what you think it encapsulates that idea. That was sort of that workshopping methodology that we did in collaboration with artists. Alexis Weaver and Rowan Savage, or who goes by the name Salvage as a musician as well. So we had some pretty wild ideas initially, because the initial prompt from Stu was, we're coming up to the 50th anniversary of the Sydney Opera House, like think about how this work maybe respond to the future of music and, what would that look like? And so we were really obsessed at the time with like Benny the Seal, who sits out the front of the Opera House. I don't know if anyone's ever like seen Benny the Seal, but we're like, maybe we can like somehow train an AI model on Benny the Seal sounds and, get him to like, I don't know, sing in the Opera House somehow through this model, or there were some really interesting ideas about like a clamshell percussion and just like thinking about the different unique stories we could be telling about the Sydney Opera House itself. But it didn't really land there. It, as all projects, we were very ambitious at the beginning and thinking about like incredibly like large immersive ideas. When we actually got to the proposal time, it came kind of right down and was sort of like, actually, this is just a live music performance and we're going to stream it. We actually thought initially that it was going to be like a live performance in front of lots of people, but it turned out that it was actually just a live performance for a live stream, and then people could tune into the live stream. And it wasn't COVID, so it was a bit of a shock at the time. So we experimented with different things in the early days. The artist and I, we experimented with this thing called tone transfer, just to start to like build our understanding about some of these things. And I've got a few little examples here. So this is, we've got RS and AW here, which is Alexis Weaver and Rowan Savage. And you can see here, Rowan had like some fur seal loops. This is where we had this like thing where we kept coming back to the seal, and we were trying to transfer that into different sounds. So I'll play some of those. Hopefully. So Rowan is very much in his practice. He was all about creating, he captured a lot of field recordings. And so he was very big into, fur seals, and as you'll see, he got really into crows at one time as well, and that was a big part of his actual commission and his work. But I'll just show what it sounds like as a trumpet. So it might not sound super impressive, but and a bit weird. And it's because essentially what we're doing is we're taking raw audio and we're transforming it into another raw audio file. So it's essentially trying to pick up and learn and figure out like with the different pitch of the input to try and translate it into a different output. And so that's why you get these kind of like wacky interpretations of one thing into another. And one of I've got in the list of resources that you can play with just a quick experiment with tone transfer so you can see it for yourself as well, and it's good fun. Let me get back over here. So I thought I'd share a little bit more about how we sort of eventually landed on what Sonic Mutations is and was, and it was a long process, but we had a lot of conversations about, how can we use it, and these were some things, the insights, and from workshopping together about what we actually thought we could do while we were just looking at all these different types of things, and we had all these different ideas about, could we use something with the seal, or could we create some kind of live performance with particular sounds from around the Opera House, or could we just kind of do something live and generative in general, and this is kind of after doing those experiments where we landed with could we start with a generative output and turn down the noise up and down again? This is from playing with a whole suite of different things. Could we use it just to jam with, as almost like a jamming partner or a collaborative partner? Could you actually somehow train an AI model to embody something that is your own essence and play it back and forth and help you practice? Can you use it to interpolate between two different ideas and help it fill in the middle of an idea, for example? And just general things let's just experiment with new sounds and see what it can do. But where we really landed was this idea of mutation and what we, as we can see from that one example where it's you can kind of put one sound in and just see how it keeps evolving and degrading in some ways, but interestingly, because it was quite early when we were playing with this, it was very, things you would lose a bit of essence but would find different qualities in the sound, and now things are almost getting too good, actually, that it's doing almost the opposite. And interestingly, Rowan is actually about to do a exhibition at the National Communications Museum with the original model we did. And he doesn't even want to use the model that I've created more recently. He wants the old version because he quite likes the weird kind of qualities of the original model, which was built on Refusion. And he said the other day in an email to me, actually, he said, I think you should know that it's almost getting better for some reason. It used to be, he used to be able to put in spoken word poetry and get just pure crow sounds out, and now he says that it's not behaving basically the way that he wants it to. It's sort of coming out with almost more poppy style outputs. And so I don't know what that's about, but we'll figure it out. It is that whole idea of the hallucinations. So essentially where we landed, and just to sort of summarize it, the prototype we built was based on something called stable diffusion, which was this text-to-image generation, and its musical offspring is something called refusion. And now refusion looks very different to what we were playing with in the first instance. But basically, in order to create a generative live music performance where artists could actually generate samples in the moment and input them into their live musical project, we had to find a way that we could output things quickly. And that, if you've ever played with any music tools, they take quite a long time. There's quite a lot of latency and lag between you typing in a text prompt and being able to get something back. So you can imagine if in a live performance context that was probably really stressful, because it was how do I actually queue up something that I've just prompted and get something out and hope that I can use it and it's going to be good enough to fit in my musical project. So this is a big body of text and I'm very aware of it, but it's a little insight into what goes on in my brain, and this was a brief for my creative technologist, and it's only just one excerpt of the brief of that. And so when you're collaborating in these kind of projects in any world, I always write a brief for other people who are playing in the space to try and get them interested in what kind of questions I'm thinking and what research I've had so far. And this was the hypothesis that I had initially and where it landed. I would look at kind of brief templates and looking at how you can kind of provide a bit of context for your potential collaborators and like some of the questions and some of your exploration so far, and then being able to give that document over to someone and see, how you can scope out that potential collaboration. So I'll read it out if it goes over your head, that's totally fine. We can talk about it in more depth later, but basically I had said, with the recent release of this thing called Refusion, text can be translated into images, and images can then be translated into spectrograms and output audio. They explained that with this idea of diffusion models, it's possible to condition their creations not only on a text prompt, but also on other images. I think this is incredibly useful for modifying sounds while preserving the structure of the original clip you like. You can control how much to deviate from the original clip and towards a new prompt using the denoising strength parameter. So denoising is something that was in an early prototype, but it's actually not in Koup music anymore, but it is in the old version. And what was really appealing about this particular player to me was the fact that it had this ability to sort of interpolate in this almost what felt like real time. So even though it was generating outputs, so you would type in something like country, folk, jazz or something, it would give you a bit of a piece of music, and then you type in another prompt and it would just kind of seamlessly kind of transition to the next piece of music. And I was like, there's something in that basically found a way to make it sound like it's producing in real time. So furthermore, on the looping interpolation to create this idea of like an infinite jam, my question here is, can we capture and generate a spectrogram for a live piece of music, use that as a seed, and then interpolate between the existing output and the newly generated output to create this idea of an infinite jam? So being very conscious of like, this is going to be a really scrappy lo-fi thing, where artists can perform the music, which is translated to the spectrogram. We can then explore some of those mechanics, and then maybe we can do like a visual thing later. So that was like, and it's totally okay, I think, at this early stage to be like, these are all my thoughts running around in my head. What do you think? And give it to a technologist and help them decipher it a little bit. So yeah, the research questions where I landed was sort of like, yes, can we use an AI as a collaborator or a jam buddy? Can we generate outputs in a live performance context? And how can we customize it for each of the artists who have been commissioned to do this performance? One of the things that I thought was really funny was that I was talking to a colleague of mine who was a creative technologist, and he basically took that wacky concept of mine and just like made a little video which sort of tries to like communicate that. So I'm going to play it for you, and hopefully it will help it all make a bit more sense. So one of my points here, though, really is that in the early stages of coming up with some pretty wild, innovative ideas, I think it's okay to be as hacky as possible and to research and then try and do proofs of concepts in ways like this. At the time, obviously we weren't just going to I personally wasn't able to just like get in there and start coding, and that wasn't really my skill set. But being able to lean on my network and try and communicate my ideas and get someone to make this silly video that was sort of just like a proof of concept of the fact that you as a musician could play music and then the AI itself could like sort of spit something back to you was something that helped, I think, bring the project to life. Because the next thing after that was basically us saying, okay, well, I think we've got the base of this concept now, let's just like try and put it in an interface and like put some big fun buttons within that. And this was a very old slide from sort of like a work in progress share back with the Sydney Opera House, where I was trying to explain all the bits and pieces. So there was like a recording button where you would be able to input a live input, like actually your voice, or maybe you could upload something, and then you could potentially actually output different little samples, and then you would be able to like select different prompts, and those prompts could be the actual artist's prompts that had been fine-tuned on the model. I've got a little video here, and I found it recently, and I've never shared it in a presentation. I don't sound very enthusiastic. I think I was very tired in the moment, but I'm going to play it because it shows you me just being. I think I was probably sending it as an update to someone to show like some very early prototyping.
By just generating something without an input, or without a live input. See how that goes. The idea is that this block generation will take like less time. Excuse me. When it's hooked up to the big computer in a moment, but it does take a few seconds. Kind of interesting. I had some good success before doing like 87%, and then I'll do some clapping and record that.
I know it's go on for longer than I needed to in this moment.
Let's see what happens now. Got a fire beat before, but wasn't able to record it properly, so this has plus.
Just going to move on a little bit so you can see the evolution of. So I think at one point, maybe I'll do a bit of singing at one point as well. This is me doing some like weird singing basically, and seeing what happens. So the ones on the prompts on the left are essentially the artists that we've been collaborating with. It's their audio data that's been fine-tuned on the model. So I'm trying to interact with their ideas. Yes?
So is it only trained on these left side prompts?
No. It's the refusion model is on the bottom.
Okay.
And then we're doing this concept of fine-tuning, where it's a sort of like being able to use, I guess, like the foundation model and the brain of the foundation model, and then you're putting new data on the top and getting it to almost like, it's the last thing I ever learned.
Like style
Yeah, like a star reference, exactly. And so we used a few different ones. The artists provided different types of audio ideas, and we just kind of kept iterating for like 6 months or so, basically, with different types of these experiments. So there's a lot of videos basically like this and different things where we just watched it get better and better and better. The refusion model at the time, and you'll actually kind of hear it has like this really weird phasey kind of artifact to it, which the new version doesn't, but I also have heard from a lot of people who are like really musically trained, they can still hear artifacts in like a lot of the AI music generated stuff. But this is the old version that, for example, Rowan is like, I actually just like how weird this one is for its like weird phasiness.
I just generating something with.
So this is a little bit more about how I think one of the original hypotheses, I guess, or like how we were like, how can we make this work when we actually get into the live performance? Let's just like map it out. And this was just one version, and this is not actually, I think, what ended up happening. But just a recommendation I really there is like, I'm a very visual person, and the way that I try and like figure these things out, I usually just need to draw lots of diagrams, and I'm actually a terrible I can't draw anything really. I'm actually terrible at that kind of stuff. So I would draw these like hilarious little doodles, and then my designers would basically turn it into something that actually is legible. But yeah, we understood that in the moment of the performance itself, we would have to potentially not just rely on like a web-based player. We would need to use the program on a localized computer so that it could run efficiently and quickly and be able to generate outputs quickly. And then we knew that the artists themselves would have to be kind of connected to that in some way, and then it would be able to output, and they could also be able to almost preview the songs in it. This is some of the actual insights that came from Alexis and Rowan at the time, which I thought was interesting because at some point we pretty much met up every couple of weeks and would see how they had been experimenting with the current version of the tool, and then they would come back to us and give us feedback, and it was very iterative in that kind of sense. But you can see here, this is some of the things, some of the feedback and we got from them at that time, and saying what do you think you've actually learned from this experience so far, and what would be helpful for other artists to know about it. So I think this is quite a nice summary of those sorts of things. Saying, it feels like it's, what's one of the good ones? Reversal, what would a piece of bliss feel like by creators with the idea of physicality and gesture, chance experiments. I think this idea of mutation kind of kept coming back up. And essentially what happened was Alexis, she ended up calling her sort of fine-tuned model AI Alexis. We recently did a TEDx talk about it. She still calls it AI Alexis, and Rowan ended up calling his fine-tuned model Cronin, because he uses a lot of crow sounds in his particular performance. Now, you'll see another evolution of how we've started to make the prototype look a bit better and a little bit cleaner, and we're starting to get that feedback and saying how would we actually want to make this feel like an intuitive, nice experience during the performance, and what feels good to you. So this is an example of maybe I want to say a V3 or a V4, and Alexis actually talking about her experience with that. No,
Hi, my name is Alexis, and today I'm going to show you how to use the Koup music interface. I am very interested in working with vocal sounds in particular. I love the kind of range and diversity that you can get with the human voice. So having a tool like this that can generate similar sounds or completely different sounds based on my own recorded inputs is really exciting. So up the top you can see that we have our input. I have uploaded a really short sample here to start with, but you can also record this in live. Below that, we have preset prompts. These were trained on the 3 artists that have already worked with this tool, but the input prompt below is a text prompt that you can write in. So for example, I've started with melody here, and I think that this means that you can type in anything and see what the AI responds with. Below that, we have denoising, so you set this before you generate a new sample, and basically it means how similar do you want that AI output to be to the original sound that you input. So the higher the denoising percentage, the more that it will skew towards that text prompt that you have input, and lower values, obviously it will sound more like the input that you uploaded. Okay, so to start with, I've generated 4 different outputs using the text prompt melody. And the sample that I uploaded was just about 5 seconds long. This is what it sounds like. Okay, so super experimental. I just wanted to see what it would output with that. So first of all, I have some melody outputs, 70% denoising, then I went down to 50% denoising just to see what the different outputs would be. 60% and 90%. You can see that I've highlighted all of these outputs in yellow. So now when I press play, it should play through all of them. So let's have a listen. Okay, so so you can see that the last one is highlighted in orange, which means that once the play button is selected, it will keep looping through. I really like that last melody one, so I'm going to download that, and you can see that that just goes straight to your download folder. I can pop that straight into Ableton and play it. And if I didn't like any of those, I can just highlight them and delete selected. I'm going to delete that input and I'm just going to record something straight in. Whoa, whoa. I'm going to give a different prompt word. You can see that in the preset prompts we have insects. I might put that in this text prompt here. It's on 90%, so we should get something that sounds a lot more like insects than the melody. But let's generate that, and I'm going to generate 3 samples. Let's listen to all 3. Okay, I quite like that last one because it had a little rhythmic element, but they're not great, so I'm just going to delete those. I'm going to turn the denoising down to 65. It kind of sounds like someone is trying to speak around lots of like buzzing insects. I like that one, I'll download it. Let's move on. I'm going to keep that recorded clip. I'm going to try talking as a preset prompt and just see what the AI spits out. I think that that can also be really, really fun. I'll keep it on 65% denoising as well, just so we get a good balance of both. Let's do something more rhythmic. I might put something like, I'll just put hip hop. Okay, I'm definitely downloading hip hop. That is amazing. It's not like a perfect loop, but you know, I can fix that. Maybe I'm going to go for something completely different and put in the word forest and just see what comes out. Do a few denoising percentage differences. Okay, so you can hear that some text prompts don't give you the results that you are probably expecting, but in my opinion, that's part of the fun. So I'll leave it there. I think you've probably got a good idea of how it works, and depending on what you upload and the text prompts that you put in, you can get some really cool and completely unexpected results.
Thank you, Alexis. It's a pretty good summary, isn't it? I haven't watched that for a while. I was like, yeah, it's pretty good. Hear it there first. So yeah, Alexis was very much involved in the process from the very beginning, and she's still an ongoing collaborator of mine today. She's an amazing, I guess, like artist, sound artist, and she's also a lecturer at the University of Sydney Conservatorium of Music as well. So Sonic Mutations is ended up becoming a project and a performance piece with Alexis and Rowan. They've essentially just played one after the other. It is a 20-minute performance, so you can watch it in your own time and see what they actually ended up coming up with. But we did it at the Sydney Opera House, and we continued to iterate even thereafter. We did another performance adding another artist called Anso in at the Powerhouse, at Powerhouse Late as well, and we had the opportunity to also do South by Southwest Sydney for the tech opening party for the first South by Southwest Sydney, which was really cool, and MCA Alpha. One thing that is just like an extra little thing, I've always had this like vision that I wanted to be able to somehow actually reflect what the artists were playing with in a visual way, so having a sort of an immersive component to it. So we also created an audio reactive visualizer that has been present for all the different performances, and essentially all that was like the technology at the time was too hard to actually connect the real outputs and do it in a live way, but what we did in a very hacky way was sort of mapped what the performance was and what the prompts were going to be, and then I was essentially like a visual jockey on my computer, and I'd press like the number on my computer that would make it switch to what I think they were up to at the performance. And I can show you a live demo of that in a minute as well. And just to give you a little bit more, like, I guess to demystify a little bit how long this whole process took. We did a proposal, at the start of 2023 in January. There was like early conversations before that even, and it sort of essentially took us 6 months to get to that point. We were given a budget of $20,000 at commission from the Sydney Opera House, which was very nice, but to be honest, it wasn't really like, that was based on so many different people being involved. That was like the artist commission fees, that was my team's concepting and design, that was getting a developer in to do all the research with me, and buying equipment as well. So we ended up putting in a lot of our own, sort of bootstrapping, but we had that advantage because we were a creative studio and we were able to sort of like lean on those sorts of things so we could make the budget go for longer, essentially. And then there was a really like a turning point, I think, as you can see here, there's like this secondary timeline where I was like, can we please, really get cracking on this? And this is like sort of the condensed timeline to the day that we had the performance. And you can see there was like a moment where we're like, this is the workshop, this is when we're gonna meet up again, this is when we will keep, putting more data into the model and finalizing the concepts to rehearse, and then on we went. This is one more little preview of Alexis doing before one of the rehearsal sessions with the visuals, and it's just in my office in Redfern. And her piece is called Control Yourself. So you can hear some of those insect sounds I think she found. So that was Alexis, a little preview of that. How am I going for time?
It's actually 3:15 now.
Okay.
Yeah, so technically it's supposed to wrap at 3:15. So
Okay.
the hour is up, but it's really interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've got all these things that you can play with. Are we interested to see Rowan's piece as well? So Rowan, as I said, he ended up giving us prompts that were fine-tuned on field recordings of crows from country. He's a Kombumerri man. And he did a very different performance than Alexis, where he did sort of spoken word poetry and transformed his voice into that of a crow with a music performance on top.
Blackly, twilight, shadows, against us I influence time. Searching brightly brightly, blackly, twilight, shadows, against us I influence time. Searching brightly brightly, blackly, twilight, shadows, against shadows.
For the sake of time, I'll move on, but essentially what you can hear there is actually at the start of the performance he speaks into the microphone and actually records his voice into the interface and then slowly transforms that. And he's basically the kind of quite intense thing for the performance for him was he was like literally just like clicking on the platform like really quickly, doing like generate in different little increments and then feeding that into his music performance live.
likely.
So this is a little bit about the BTS of where we actually landed in the end, and this is how it worked. So as you can see, as I was saying with Rowan, you can see that he would select the crow prompt. He would select this idea of like denoising in 5 to 10% increments, and download them really quickly, and then like add them into a pre-existing Ableton track. Whereas Alexis, she had a bunch of this AI Alexis prompts, and they were sort of very vocal, and she would have this quite fixed denoising value because she was more about wanting to have very specific control in her practice, and would generate samples and download those, and then also use it on the Ableton push in the performance. This is just a bit of a summary really around that, but this was taken from Sydney Opera House, a little bit of a sense of that, all the different other activations we had within that. And then this is sort of where I've landed now. This is like the final, what you'll be able to play with now as well. It sounds like we're going to run out of time, but you're very welcome to play with it whenever you get the chance, and I would love your feedback. But the current version really is this idea of like a generative remix tool that unlocks, you know, new forms of creativity and experimental sound with this idea of fine-tuned models. And this is an example of when it works really well. And I'm tapping into violins, metal music, and Patrick Light is another artist that we've been working with who's from LA and has lots of ambient music. So this is where we've landed now, where this is the future vision around how we can build the artist community that's going to shape the future of AI and music, and we're hoping to launch sort of this idea of like more of a no-code music model building platform so that you yourself can do essentially what these artists have done, but in a way that doesn't really require us to, you know, have to actually like get a developer in. So I want to make that really easy and accessible for people, and then find out what people would actually do and use them for. Hopefully that's like to capture this idea of like your sonic signature, or scale your music in a new way, or maybe monetize your music in a different way. Maybe even, I know a lot of artists and musicians out there have like so much music that goes untouched and is gathering dust, and like what could we possibly be doing that as a way to fine tune a model and actually benefiting from that. So I'll wrap it up there, but I'm very happy to share all the rest of these resources. This is like just a bit of explainer of that, but really if you want to maybe just scan this will take you to essentially a list of resources. There's the Koup music beta to play with, there's Elf Tech that I mentioned, Mimu you can just listen to, it's really easy if you just want like a ambient generative remix engine to listen to music. Magenta, which is Google's Magenta, has a whole platform of different demos that are really easy to launch in browser as well. 11 Labs is that kind of voice model, and Music LM is that kind of example of text to music. I'll also add into this the Sonic Mutations link as well, so that you can watch that in your own time. Thank you.